The treble clef is probably the most difficult symbol that you will have to learn to write. It's going to take a little bit of practice, but I'm going to show you a way to write this so that you can write it always consistently and neatly. And this is going to be in several parts, so we're going to break it down part by part. The first thing I want you to think about is I want you to imagine the upper and lower boundaries of the treble clef. Imagine that there is a ledger line right here above the staff, and this is going to be imaginary. I'll write it out here, but when we actually do it, it will be imaginary. And imagine that there is a ledger line just below the staff. Those are going to be our upper and lower boundaries of the treble clef. So the first stroke, or the first movement that we make with our pen or pencil with the treble clef, happens this way. We start down here on that bottom ledger line, that imaginary bottom ledger line, and we write what looks like a note head, but a note head that's maybe like half the size of an actual note head. Here's what a real note head would look like. It's just like a little, not quite a dot, but a little bit larger than a dot, but not quite as big as a note head. From that note head, we're going to create a line that goes straight up and hits the top line of the staff, just like that. Once we hit the top line of the staff, we're going to veer off to the right like this, and we're going to end up pointing this way, just to the right. Now, if I do that in one stroke, it actually comes out a little bit neater. It's a little bit harder to sort of break this down. But let me do it all in one stroke for you. So we have our little note head, our line up, then we veer to the right. That is stroke one. And when I say stroke one, that's sort of the first movement of our pen, that little note head, line up, curve to the right. So our second stroke is going to be a little bit more tricky. What we're going to do is we're going to start where we ended up here, going off to the right, and we're going to switch directions like this. We're going to curve off in the other direction, and we're going to hit the place where our line going up meets the fourth line right here. Just like that. Once we do that, we're going to cross the line that we made before. We're going to curve out, and we're going to hit the fourth line right here. Once we hit the fourth line, we're going to curve back, and we're going to hit the bottom line, and hopefully the bottom line will hit the bottom line right at the place where we start to cross our line going up, at which point we will curve up, hit the third line exactly where our the line that we created goes, and then come back down and then hang just a little bit over the second line like that. So that's a lot of points to remember in that second stroke. We have to hit the fourth line, we have to hit the second line, we have to hit the first line, and we have to hit the third line. But if we put that all together, let me do that over here. Here's our first stroke. Change directions. It actually can be pretty seamless. And it's going to give us a good-looking, consistent treble clef every time. So what I would suggest is the best way to practice this is actually to practice it one part at a time. So don't try to make the whole treble clef at once. Start by practicing that first stroke. Just get good at making that little note head, the line up, and the hook to the right. Do that, maybe 10, 20 times on your music paper. Then go back and see if you can fill in the rest. crossing at the fourth line, reversing the curve at the second line, hitting the first line, hitting the third line, and then coming back up like that. Fourth line, second line, first line, third line, crossing the second line. After a little practice, and by a little practice I mean this is probably going to take somewhere between 50 to 75 clefs before you really start getting comfortable with it. You too are going to be able to draw neatly and consistently a treble clef time after time after time. And I think it's one of the coolest things you can learn how to do, just in terms of sort of the art project part of learning music notation. So there you go. You now know how to make a treble clef. Don't get discouraged. It's going to take a lot of practice, but keep at it and your treble clefs will get better.